Robert Eggers' new movie, The Northman, appears April 2022. Is this movie any good as his last couple of movies? Let me tell you my analysis and opinion coming up next. In my view, Eggers' last movie, The Lighthouse, is a masterwork. I really love that movie. I think The Witch is okay to decent in his first movie, so I was pretty excited to see The Northman, which was in a theater near me. It's getting wide release in the US. This movie comes out in a year with a couple of medieval tales, The Last Duel by Ridley Scott, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which was put out by A24, so I was having those movies in my mind as I watched this one. Now, I knew nothing about this movie, didn't read anything about it beforehand. About halfway through, I thought, oh man, this is Hamlet, and it turns out, yeah, this movie is based on the origin tale, the original tale, that Hamlet was based on, and this is a grubbier, earthier Scandinavian Hamlet, although there's more to it than that, or maybe less to it than that, but you can compare the two, and I think this movie works best for me, in fact, as a novel and different filmed version of Hamlet. In fact, this movie alludes to a number of prior Hamlets. One scene in particular tipped me off to this. Franco Zeffirelli famously, I think, had Mel Gibson and Glenn Close. Mel Gibson playing Hamlet, Glenn Close playing the mother of Hamlet, Gertrude. And it was an incestuous, not quite relationship in a bedroom scene, which is kind of disgusting, but I guess some critics read that into Hamlet. Well, you have that here in The Northman, only it's worse and more disgusting to me. So you get this movie trying to allude to past movies. I also saw a few other movies in this. Come and See by the great Russian director Klimov and Yojimbo, and a few other films are in this movie, so Eggers is well learned in terms of movie history and movie lore. Now, the movie is like Hamlet. A father who's a king is killed by his brother, and then the son, who is the star of the show, the hero, is in exile. He grows up in Russia, the land of the Rus, and he wants revenge on his father's killer, who is his brother, well, his father's brother, his uncle. And then when he goes to do that, well, I won't spoil anything, but those of you who know the play Hamlet kind of know sort of what's going to happen here. Now, if Hamlet is for Elizabethan Englanders, which is a Christian era in England, then this movie is for pre-Christian Scandinavians. I know they don't exist, so maybe we should say post-Christian Scandinavians. A lot of neo-paganism in this movie. An ode and a tribute, in a way, to the ancient Norse religions and myths. This movie is for Odin worshippers. If you believe in Valhalla, you will get a big rise out of this movie. In fact, I don't think I've seen a movie celebrate, in certain ways, if you want to watch it this way, the heroism of the Scandinavian warriors that this movie is paying tribute to. Probably, you could probably read it in a counter-narrative way as something against masculinity, but I saw it as a sort of somewhat of a celebration of the hero in this movie, even though it may criticize him and his ethical choices. Yet, I think in the end, it's really hard to read the final scenes as nothing but a triumph of a sort. And thus, I think this movie is for Odin worshippers, those of you who are out there who worship Odin and whatever other Norse gods there are. The movie has a strategy, I think, which is to have the hero become a dog. Actually, his father leads him in a ceremony where they take an oath. The boy wants to become king. He takes an oath to become king, and they act like dogs. And then throughout the movie, this idea that men are animals, and they have to overcome or maybe celebrate their animal nature. It's actually hard for me to tell which the movie preferred, overcoming or celebrating, embracing animal nature, but you have a lot of violence in this movie, a lot of earthy, grubby, bloody violence in which intestines fall out, heads get chopped off, and so on, with the attendant sound effects. This movie is not for everybody. In fact, for a very few, it's pretty squeamish. I thought the effect of this movie, because it comes out during a superhero era with Marvel and DC and everything else, is that this was trying to say that those movies are for juveniles. The movie has a story arc and some elements of superhero fare, particularly, I think, the revenge tale, the hero needing to defeat a big bad boss character of a sort, and all the fighting and other things in the movie, exile, slavery, and tough guy heroism, that I think this movie is a response to some of the superhero fare, and Thor, the Marvel movie, and all the Thor movies are for kids. If you watch this movie, those movies will seem like kids' fare in comparison to it. What I couldn't get over here was the absolute dominance of the sky and the hills. There are a great number of shots in which you see riders on horses or people at the very, very bottom of the frame. I can't remember a movie where the human characters are so small at the bottom of the frame over a period of several shots. There must be a dozen or more shots like this, with the volcano as the opening shot, and we're going to go back to the volcano, which is the gates of hell, Hel, near the end of the movie, and then hills just dominating everything. And so I wasn't sure what the effect of that was, but it is a pattern in the movie. I also thought that the stakes of the movie were quite interesting, even though you do have this sort of titanic battle and these giant men with huge muscles. Really, if you think about the scope of this movie, and they're mostly in Iceland for the middle and end of the movie, it's really small-time stuff, local tribal warfare at best, and we're not talking about a vast kingdom with lots of servants and slaves. We're talking about a small local place, or so it seems in this movie. And so the nature, the hills, the volcano in particular, are vastly superior to petty human affairs in this movie, and I think that's partly what those shots of the minuscule humans represent. Thus, you have the idea of the gods and the ascension to Valhalla being the desire for the warrior ultimately, and you can kind of see why these guys do what they do in the movie as far as the Vikings go. Having said all that, I found this movie to be unnecessarily dark and violent. It is maybe needlessly pagan or overtly pagan, and maybe that's an attempt to be realistic and actually to depict the 9th century. This is set in 895 AD accurately. Overall, what was the purpose of this? I would love to know your comments and what you think this movie is about, because I had a hard time thinking it was about too much, besides the thrill of seeing a hero try to get revenge on his father's killer and his relationship to the earth and passing on his lineage and so on. This is definitely, I'm sure it's going to be criticized as a bro movie or a steroid movie or something like that. I think the attempt is noble here in relationship to Hamlet and to Marvel and to other sorts of movies. But as this movie by itself, how is it going to strike viewers? Is this good for all the younger males who watch movies these days? I am not entirely sure about that. I find this to be too dark and too violent, for me at least, without any extra stuff in it to help us sort through why it's this dark and violent. A comparison would be Scorsese and Scorsese's best movies. He does have his reasons. You can detect them. You can be a clever reader and viewer and understand those. But here, I don't quite get it. So I'm only going to give it 2.5 stars. That may be even too generous. I actually didn't like this movie as much as Sir Gawain, even though I didn't like that movie all that much. I'd probably rather rewatch that one. I'm shocked that I'm saying that because I usually like Eggers' stuff, or have liked his first 2 movies. So I think I was disappointed in this, but I'm wondering if I miswatched it. So maybe I'll watch it again, but I don't know. It's just so disturbing to me. Maybe I'm just too wimpy as a middle-aged guy, but this probably wasn't for me. Was it for you? What do you think this movie was about? Let us know in the comments. And please subscribe to this channel for more great content. Thank you and have a great day.